Imagine your life built brick by brick, 5 years of late nights at Amazon HQ, a craftsman home in Kirkland Crossroads, a custom Mac Pro rig worth nearly $18,000 vanishing in a single bold act of betrayal. I'm Lucas Thompson, and yesterday at 3:14 p.m. Pacific, I got the ring alert that changed everything. Rain streaked the window pane as I stared, heart pounding at my phone. Nest Cam detected motion behind framed art. My chest tightened. That safe held more than hardware. It held my pride, my late-night grind, my claim to the American dream. At 32, I've lived in this 4-bedroom craftsman since I snagged the senior product manager role at Amazon 5 years ago. Grandpa Henry, 80 and still iron-willed after surviving the Korean War, calls my success earned, not given. He lives with me rent-free as a moral compass and occasional poker partner over Maker's Mark, always with his vintage Zippo lighter engraved Thompson family, a memento from his old unit. In Seattle's damp afternoon light, his silhouette by the window looks as resolute as the Olympic mountains beyond Lake Washington. Then there's Zoe, my 24-year-old sister, fresh UW Seattle grad, and a budding lifestyle influencer. She moved in last winter when rent in Capitol Hill ballooned past her entry-level barista salary. Her TikTok glow-up videos and sponsored coffee shots at Starbucks Reserve Roastery mask a deeper insecurity. She believes her worth hinges on new gear and follower counts. I cautioned her never to touch my office, especially that biometric safe hidden behind the abstract painting I snagged at Pike Place Market, but looks can betray intentions. I was on site at the Amazon Spheres when the Ring notification pinged. I dropped my phone on the polished concrete desk like it burned me, cane-toed Timberlands echoing as I bolted for the parking garage. My silver Subaru Outback squeaked under the wipers as I slammed into reverse Seattle drizzle, blurring neon taillights into watercolor streaks. In the rear view, I saw the Costco cold brew I'd chugged minutes ago slosh in its cup holder, my last comfort before chaos. The drive home felt endless. Highway 520 rolled out like a gray mirror. Streetlights bounced off wet pavement. Every jolt from the speed bumps made my coffee slosh, my jaw clench. I kept glancing at the Nest timeline frames of Zoe creeping past my office door, phone in hand, shoulders tense. But each clip froze before showing what she took. I whispered, "Please, be nothing priceless though," dread coiled in my gut. By the time I turned off my headlights and walked up to the front porch, my fingers were numb, not from cold, but from adrenaline. The craftsman's porch light painted everything in amber. I dropped my keys with a soft clack. The door creaked open. Silence greeted me, thick as the fog outside. No Zoe-style laughter, no Grandpa's gentle snore somewhere in the study, just the tick of the old Howard Miller wall clock echoing down the hallway. I slipped into the office. The Nest chime warned me of fresh footage, a single motion alert at 3:12 p.m. I pressed play on my laptop. Zoe's reflection flickered in the painting's glass. She paused, glanced left and right, then lightly tapped the canvas. The security sensor clicked, the painting swung forward to reveal the biometric scanner. I watched her thumb hover, imprint a match, her grin flashing in the low light before the safe door lurched open. I yanked the laptop closer, breath catching as I rewound. My custom Mac Pro tower and Pro Display XDR, an 18 grand setup crowned with M2 Ultra Silicon 192 GB RAM and an 8 TB SSD, should have been secure behind that steel door. My hands trembled as I pressed sync data to double-check serial numbers. The footage was undeniable. Zoe zipped out her arms, hugging something heavy to her chest. I paused on her face. No remorse, just resolute determination. My pulse hammered so loud I could hear it in my ears. A cold draft snaked up my spine through the cracked window, smelling of rain and the faint hint of damp cedar from Grandpa's workshop. My mind raced. Should I call KPD now, arrest warrants, or confront her first? I glanced at the Zippo on my desk. Grandpa's Zippo thought of the man who never cowered at injustice. He'd know exactly what to do. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs, soft, deliberate. My breath hitched. Was Zoe returning for more, or was Grandpa checking in on my late afternoon work? I rose, every muscle coiled like a spring. The dim light made the doorway a shadow-draped tunnel. My hand skimmed the edge of my pocket where I kept my phone and proof of her betrayal. I stepped toward the door, and that's when the floorboards creaked again, closer this time, as if someone was testing each step. The Nest alert flashed one last time, motion detected, subject facing camera. I gripped the doorknob. Time slowed. My heart thundered. And then, silence. No greeting, no apology, just the whispering Seattle rain and the hollow ticking of the clock. I opened the door and froze. My heart must have skipped a beat when I swung that Craftsman door open. Zoe stood there in the dim hallway light, rain dripping from her hairphone clutched so tight her knuckles were ghost white. Behind her, the abstract painting was still slightly ajar, the biometric safe's steel edge gleaming where it shouldn't. My breath caught at the sight of the empty shelf. My custom Mac Pro Tower and Pro Display XDR weren't just gone, they'd been ripped from the safe that cost more than most folks' cars. I stepped inside, every footfall echoing on the hardwood floors. The hallway light painted stripes on my damp jacket. "Zoe," I said, voice a growl I barely recognized. "What the hell happened?" She didn't flinch, just tilted her head like she was waiting for me to apologize for interrupting her. My pulse thundered. The injustice smacked me harder than the Pacific winter wind she'd crossed the line I warned her about 1,000 times. She lifted her chin, eyes bright with defiance. "Lucas," her voice cracked. I crossed my arms, the rainwater drying between my sleeves. "I watched you on Nest, Zoe. You hacked the scanner with your thumb, my thumb. You knew exactly what you were doing." My words landed like punches, heavy and undeniable. She swallowed, glancing at the floor. "I thought I needed it," she whispered, voice pitched between guilt and anger. I felt the old wound of responsibility. Her job hunt stalled, her sponsored posts barely scraping by. She'd begged me for help, rent, follower boosts gear, and I'd said no, reminding her this was my livelihood. I'd pushed her and told her hard work mattered more than flash. Now here she was, paying me back in betrayal. I stepped closer, so close I could see the testing line in her eye makeup running from the drizzle. My heart twisted, family versus principle. "So you borrowed it. You planned to give it back after a few days." I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my tone. She shook her head, lashes trembling. "I promise, I was just going to use it for my next product shoot. The one brand deal could have changed everything." Her lips quivered. I reached for my phone in my pocket, the camera footage, the time-stamped proof of her fingerprint on that log screen. "Or maybe you sold it already," I said quietly. She flinched like I'd punched her. Her hand darted for her purse. I recognized that move, calling Mom. "Don't call anyone," I warned, tone low. She froze, one hand on her phone. Then something snapped. Her shoulders slumped like she'd run a marathon in heartbreak. "I'm sorry, Lucas. I thought you'd understand. You always get credit for making it here." My chest tightened. Every word felt like a knife. She saw my success as a shield, not a story of sweat and late nights. I felt rage and disappointment collide. "Understand. You stole my future," I said, voice fierce. "I could call Kirkland PD right now, press charges. You'd lose more than followers." She lifted her head, tears pooling. "Don't do that," she begged, voice cracking. "I'll fix this. I'll work extra shifts, whatever it takes. Please." My fingers itched to dial. Then behind us, a single deliberate click echoed through the hallway, the faint but unmistakable sound of Henry's Zippo lighter snapping open. I froze. Zoe's eyes shot to the doorway. We turned. The hallway light caught the brass gleam of the Zippo in Grandpa's hand. He stood there, silhouette framed by the warm glow of the study lamp behind him. Not a word escaped his lips, just that slow, purposeful click. His presence filled the space like an accusation more powerful than any testimony. The rain still whispered against the windows, and for a heartbeat we all stood motionless, trapped between betrayal and judgment. I swallowed and forced my voice out. Grandpa? He didn't blink. The Zippo flame hadn't ignited yet, but I knew he never clicked it without resolve. Our breaths hung in the stale air. And then, as Grandpa took a single step forward, I realized there was no turning back. I barely registered Grandpa's slow, deliberate step until the hallway light caught the Zippo's flame, small but fierce, dancing in his weathered hand. My pulse slammed against my ribs. Zoe sank back against the wall, eyes huge and wet. Get down. Grandpa's voice was flat ice under velvet. On your knees. Rain tapped a steady rhythm on the windows like a metronome counting down our options. Zoe's legs buckled. She knelt so fast the hardwood floors creaked under her. My jaw went slack. I wanted to shout to grab him, but the raw intensity in his gaze froze me in place. The flame reflected in Grandpa Henry's eyes that once stared down mortar shells on a Korean hillside. Now they stared at my sister, the flicker tracing the lines etched by 80 years of unbending principle. The air smelled of damp cedar and gasoline from earlier projects, a scent that suddenly felt threatening. Zoe's hands trembled on her thighs. She stared at the little brass lighter as if it could tell her what to do. Tell her, Grandpa said, voice steady but thunderous. Return what isn't hers and apologize. Zoe's lips quivered. She swallowed hard, voice a whisper. Lucas, I'm sorry. Her apology dangled between us like a loose thread. I saw her chest rising and falling so fast I worried she'd collapse. My teeth ground together, heart splitting between relief that she spoke and rage that she'd been pushed to this moment. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. She took everything, my Mac Pro, the display XDR, my life's work, I said, voice rough. But Grandpa held up a finger, cutting me off. Silence. He snapped the Zippo closed. The flame vanished in an instant, leaving only the muted thud. He was still standing unshaken. Zoe blinked as if emerging from a dream and pushed herself to her feet. Her shoulders were hunched, her hoodie soaked through, but her gaze found mine. I'll fix it, she rasped. I can get it back. I promise. Grandpa didn't move. He turned his back to us, his Zippo slipping into his coat pocket. The room felt suddenly empty without that flame's defiance. Rainlight shimmered on the floorboards like spilled mercury. Then he took a single, measured step toward the front door. We both instinctively backed up, but there was nowhere to go. The hallway narrowed at the entrance. Where are you going? I blurted, voice tight with confusion. Zoe looked between us, lost. Grandpa paused with his hand on the door handle. To make sure you learn respect, he said over his shoulder, tone calm but unyielding. The door clicked shut behind him. For a moment, the crack of that latch echoed like a verdict. I opened my mouth to argue, but Zoe caught my sleeve. Her fingers were ice cold. Lucas, please. Her voice trembled through the wool of my coat. I squeezed her hand, torn. Do we follow him or stop her from shrinking into guilt? The hallway light flickered as if nudging me toward a choice. I exhaled and stepped forward past Zoe and pulled the door open. The drizzle had turned to a steady downpour. Grandpa's silhouette was already a fading shape on the porch. His boots made soft thuds on the stone steps as he headed around to the side of the house. The drip of rain from the eaves sounded like whispers. Zoe swiped at her hair and hurried after him, bare feet slipping on the wet stones. I hesitated, torn between intervening and letting him lead. By the garage door, I caught up. The light above it cast a sickly yellow glow. Grandpa Henry's profile was rigid against the metal door. He lifted his hand to knock, then paused. From the corner of my eye, I saw Zoe pause on the porch, the door frame separating us. Her face was set with fear and apology. I took a breath, smelled the gasoline cans stacked by the wall, and realized the moment had shifted from confrontation to something far darker. Grandpa's voice floated back in low tones I couldn't quite hear. The garage door rattled open. Inside, tools hung on pegboards, a battered lawnmower sat in the corner, and 2 red jerry cans gleamed under the flickering bulb. My stomach churned. I glanced at Zoe. She stared at the cans like they were loaded guns. I swallowed, heart pounding with dread and adrenaline. He bent and picked up one jerry can, strapping its handle in one smooth motion. The metal clanged against his leg. He straightened, turning to face the house chest taut. Rain plastered his coat to his back, droplets cascading off the brim of his baseball cap. His eyes met mine, no anger, just iron resolve. Zoe took a half step forward, then froze. I saw tears mingle with raindrops on her cheeks. You wanted to show her respect, Grandpa. I rasped, voice barely audible over the rain. He said nothing. He hefted the can and began walking across the driveway toward my silver Subaru Outback rainwater pooling at my feet. I shot Zoe an anguished look before following boots splashing in the shallow puddles. The jerrycan swung at his side like a pendulum, marking time until finality. The car's wet paint gleamed under the porch light, my safe haven, my weekend road trips, my life's small luxuries. Zoe trailed behind him, shoulders hunched, silent. I should have stopped them. Tear that can away, argue mercy, but something in Grandpa's stride sent a chill through me. Between justice and mercy, he'd chosen fire. He knelt by the hood and twisted the spout. A pale yellow stream arced onto the metal, hissing as it kissed the rain-slicked surface. Zoe gasped, voice quivering. "Don't, please." I swallowed, lips dry. My grandmother used to say respect was earned, not given, that sometimes love means holding people accountable. But this dousing my car, her car with gasoline, seemed irrevocable. The sickly hiss of fuel on metal was the only sound until the sky cracked with thunder. Grandpa never looked away. He filled both cars, moving methodically. Subaru, then Zoe's cherry red Tesla Model 3. I stood frozen, rain plastering my hair, heart hammering in my ears. After the last drip from the jerry can, he straightened and set the can down by his feet. The rain sluiced over the driveway, washing away some of the liquid, but not the looming threat. Zoe collapsed to her knees beside the Tesla, trembling so hard I feared she'd break. I wanted to shout, "Stop!" but the thunder drowned me out. Grandpa lifted his hand from his pocket again, this time without the Zippo, and pointed downward. "Kneel," he said, voice low, but carrying the weight of decades. Zoe sank lower. Her sobs were muffled by the rain. I stepped forward, fists clenched, torn between pulling her up and protecting her from what might come next. Then an urgent blare cut through the storm sirens. Red and blue lights pulsed across the wet pavement. A Kirkland police cruiser skidded to a halt at the end of the driveway. 2 officers spilled out, rain jackets gleaming. One shouted, "Hands where we can see them." In that instant, the gasoline-glazed cars, the kneeling figures, and Grandpa's silent stance became a tableau of crisis and consequence. I stared at Grandpa, waiting for him to drop the lighter he hadn't pulled out yet or to say anything. But he stood tall, shoulders squared, the jerry can at his feet. Zoe whimpered beside him, rain running in rivulets down her face. The officers took in the scene, shields raised against the elements and the unknown. My throat tightened. In the flash of red and blue light, I realized nothing would ever go back to the way it was. The Kirkland PD cruiser's red and blue strobes carved jagged shadows across the rain-slick driveway. Officer Ramirez stepped forward, rain beating on his badge. "Sir, put the can down and back away," he barked into the storm. Grandpa Henry Water, dripping from his cap, released the jerry can with a soft thud that echoed like a gavel. Zoe trembled beside it, hands splayed on the wet concrete. My pulse pounded against my chest as I watched the scene freeze, an 80-year-old war vet, 2 soaked cars, and my sister sobbing at his feet. Officer Chen joined Ramirez, voice measured. "Everyone stay right there. No sudden moves." The air smelled sharp gasoline, blending with damp cedar and the faint bitterness of espresso from my urgent cold brew in the cup holder. I took a hesitant step forward, boots splashing in puddles, heart torn between relief that no one was about to light a match and dread for what came next. Zoe's head lolled forward, wet hair plastered against her cheeks. Shame drew rivulets from her eyes into the cracks of the driveway. Ramirez nodded at me. "You the young man, what's going on?" His tone wasn't accusatory but curious, professional. I swallowed, throat dry, and held up my phone. "My name's Lucas Thompson. She stole my custom Mac Pro setup from a hidden biometric safe worth about $18,000. I have Nest footage." The officers exchanged a glance before Ramirez crouched to Zoe's level. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Zoe's shoulders shook. She raised her chin, voice cracking. I was just borrowing it. I didn't mean to steal." Each word hung between us like a judgment. Chen spoke into her radio dispatch. "We have a potential felony theft in progress. Suspect is cooperating. One set of peaceful surrendering hands." He nodded at Ramirez, who stood and flicked his flashlight toward the cars. The Subaru's hood was slick with fuel. Zoe's Tesla glistened like a prize under the yellow light. "Sir, can you confirm these vehicles have been doused with gasoline?" Ramirez asked Grandpa Henry. Grandpa's jaw was set, rain streaming down his coat. He nodded once, voice low. "I taught her respect of property. If you excuse thieves, you get more of the same." His words landed with the weight of his 80 years. Ramirez rubbed his chin eyes, flicking between Zoe and Henry. "Sir, I need you to step back." Grandpa complied, stepping onto the porch where the house's motion sensor flickered. Chen moved to secure the jerry cans one by one. He lifted them, careful not to spill the slick liquid. The hissing whisper of rain on fuel-slick metal made my skin crawl. Ramirez turned to me. "What's her name?" I swallowed again. "Zoe Thompson, my sister." He nodded. Calling into his radio. "Suspect is Zoe Thompson. Willing to cooperate. My name's Ramirez, badge 208. Need a warrant for a search of safe contents and any recovered property." He flicked his radio shut and faced us. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for felony theft of high-value property. Anything you say can be used in court." Zoe's gasp was pained. Her hands rose, cuffed behind her back with surprising gentleness. The metal cuffs clicked. Zoe's gaze found mine, eyes red, pleading. "Lucas, please," she whispered. The echo of her voice felt like a stone in my gut. Ramirez gave me a look. "Do you want to press charges?" My throat constricted. Under that strobe-lit rain, family ties felt like chains dragging me under. I remembered how she begged, how Grandpa demanded respect with flame and fuel. Justice or mercy? The choice dangled like a noose. I exhaled, voice thick. "Yes, I want to file a full report." Ramirez nodded, relief softening his features. "Understood. We'll book her and coordinate with the county prosecutor." He placed a hand on Zoe's shoulder, guiding her toward the cruiser. Zoe stumbled a step, tears mixing with rain. Grandpa's lips twitched, pride or sorrow, I couldn't tell. As Ramirez led Zoe across the driveway, Chen approached Grandpa. "Sir, we'll need to inventory these cans and vehicles as evidence." Grandpa didn't argue, standing rigid as a statue. Chen added, "Your statement will be taken at the station." Grandpa's eyes flicked to me. No warmth passed between us, only steel resolve. The cruiser's taillights pulsed, painting Zoe's face in crimson. Ramirez closed the door, engines idling like a beast about to roar. I stood under the motion sensor glow, empty cold brew rolling in my car's cup holder, breath misting in the rainy night air. My sister sat in the back seat, face pressed to the glass, watching me. Guilt clashed with relief like thunderclouds overhead. Ramirez walked back, boots splashing, and offered me a hand. "Mr. Thompson, let's get your statement." I nodded, voice hollow. "Yeah, let's." Inside the cruiser, Zoe's silhouette, slumped shoulders shaking. The car door shut with a final click that sounded like a tombstone being set. When I turned, Grandpa was already heading back into the house, Zippo pocketed, but spirit unbroken. I hesitated on the porch. Should I follow him, thank him, argue that this was too far? Instead, I sank onto the bottom step. Rain plastered my hair. The weight of the past hour pressed down like the Pacific Northwest sky at dusk. I took out my phone and watched the nest footage again the moment Zoe's face lit with resolve, the sway of the safe door, my own reflection in the screen. Then I stared at the driveway, 2 cars glazed in fuel, one sister cuffed in a police cruiser, one grandfather fading into the house's warm light. Justice Shelby would say isn't always kind, and my American dream felt like a mansion built on cracked foundation. I closed my eyes against the rain, wondering now that the dust had settled what would really remain of our family. The cruiser pulled away. Siren's echo fading. Grandpa's porch light glowed steadfast behind me. I rose, boots squelching on wet wood, and stepped inside. The door clicked shut. Darkness, except for the muted hum of the study lamp. My fingers shook as I shut the blinds. Through the glass, I saw the faint outline of a figure, Grandpa standing tall like a sentinel. I realized then that there was one final choice left. Would I rebuild or let those cracks swallow us whole? The morning after Zoe's arrest, the house felt hollow. I woke to Grandpa Henry's steady breathing from the study, the rain still drumming the roof. In the kitchen, the cold brew sat untouched, its empty cup holder echoing the emptiness in my chest. I poured myself a fresh cup, hands shaking, and stared through the window at the driveway, where the Subaru and Tesla had once gleamed. Now only faint stains of gasoline marked the concrete like bruises that refused to fade. I closed my eyes and thought of Zoe huddled in the back of that cruiser, cuffs biting her wrists, pleading for mercy. That image burned hotter than Grandpa's Zippo ever did. By noon, the eviction notice I'd drafted clacked onto the counter. 30 days to vacate, legal, ruthless, necessary. My parents, Richard and Laura, had a year of rent-free living behind them, but no thanks to that, they'd defended Zoe as she stole from me. Now they faced the consequences. I set the notice on the table beside a fresh stack of mail letters from Kirkland PD, a citation from the county prosecutor, and a fee statement for court recording $1,200. I read each one slowly, letting the weight of every dollar and every legal clause land like stones in my gut. They came home that evening with suitcases and a silent desperation. Laura's eyes were red-rimmed mascara streaked down her cheeks, but she held her chin high, barista pride, unbroken even in disgrace. Richard shuffled behind her shoulders, hunched hands in his pockets like a teenager caught shoplifting. I handed them the eviction notice wordlessly. They read it, lips moving, disbelief flickering across their faces. "Lucas, this is our home," my mother said. Voice small. I felt a familiar tug, family first right, but I clenched my jaw. "You defended theft," I said quietly. "You had your chance." The kitchen light flickered as thunder rolled over Lake Washington. Over the next 2 weeks, they scrambled. Craigslist leads for sublets, phone calls at midnight to desperate landlords who scoffed at their credit score history. Rent in Kirkland had skyrocketed, driven by Amazon's northward expansion. 1-bedroom studio apartments started at $1,800 a month, plus utilities. Richard patched together enough from his modest savings, and Laura scraped tips from her barista shifts at Pike Place Market. They landed a small garage apartment 10 miles east in a quasi-industrial district where street lamps were few and the cold draft of the sound seeped through uninsulated walls. On moving day, I woke early and met them at the empty Craftsman porch. Boxes were stacked like tombstones. Old photo albums, Laura's ceramic coffee mugs, Richard's insurance adjuster binders. Zoe's spot in the fridge was marked by a single untouched bottle of almond milk. I helped load their sedan, my old Camry, which had survived Grandpa's threat unscathed, and watched them drive off into the gray morning mist, brake lights fading like tears. The porch light clicked off behind me, and I realized how quiet the house was without their presence. A weight lifted, but the ache of severed ties pressed harder against my ribcage. Grandpa found me on the porch just as I was closing the gate. He placed a hand on my shoulder, nodded strong. "You did what you had to," he said, voice gravelly. I nodded, eyes on the road they'd taken. He sighed, then reached into his coat and handed me a small package tied with twine, his Zippo, the one he'd clicked in the hallway that night. "Keep it," he said. "A reminder that respect is non-negotiable." I accepted it, palm warm against brass. Behind me, potted ferns shivered in the breeze as if applauding. I closed the porch gate and stepped inside the front door, swinging shut with a gentle finality. 2 days later, Richard called. His voice crackled with static from the garage apartment. "Lucas, I wanted to tell you, Zoe's bail hearing is next week." I felt the world tilt. Zoe, released from jail under our parents' supervision, had scraped together $10,000 for bail loaned by a cousin in Seattle's Eastlake neighborhood. That cousin, Mr. Nguyen, had brokered a deal Zoe would live in the garage indefinitely until the trial, working odd jobs. She's terrified, Lucas," Richard said. "She called me crying. She didn't know what she'd done. I remembered Grandma's cookie jars and Grandpa's poker games, family memories lost in a stolen high-end setup." I exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry." It felt hollow, but I meant it. I drove by their new place later that day, an unassuming gray building with single-pane windows. The garage unit's door was propped open, revealing a single futon, a folding table, and Zoe's laptop on a dusty shelf. She looked up when she saw me. Her face was pale eyes rimmed, but she managed a small wave. I noticed her ankle-thin wire glinting under her jeans, a GPS monitor mandated by bail conditions. My breath caught. She'd gone from influencer freedom to tethered confinement. I knocked, and she slipped off the futon to let me in. The air smelled of instant ramen and damp concrete. "Thanks for coming," she whispered, voice so small I had to lean in. I sat glancing at her monitor. "How's it feel?" She frowned, tracing the wire. "Like I can't outrun my mistakes." Her words landed with brutal honesty. That night, I lay awake thinking of the cracks in our family's foundation. The house felt quieter, emptier, without them all. I thumbed Grandpa's Zippo lighter, remembering his unwavering stance. It clicked open, no flame, just metal echoing his resolve. I realized I had choices: let the cracks widen or mend them with tough love. But the court date loomed, and Zoe's future dangled in the balance of restitution and remorse. I slipped the Zippo into my pocket and turned off my lamp, the dark enveloping me like an unanswered question. The next afternoon, a thick envelope arrived stamped King County Superior Court. My hands clenched as I slid it open. Inside was a summons for Zoe's preliminary hearing, date-time, judge's name. Exactly 2 weeks from now. My heart stuttered. I folded the paper chest, tightening at the weight of what was to come, a courtroom where my sister's fate and our families would be decided. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the blinds. I stood at the window, watching clouds gather over the sound. The rain would return soon, and with it, the storm of justicia and forgiveness. I took a steadying breath, braced for the next reckoning. The morning of the hearing, I stepped under the portico of the King County Superior Courthouse and felt the weight of every late night at Amazon, every drop of Seattle rain that had fallen while I built my life here. Inside, marble floors gleamed beneath a soaring, domed ceiling, painted with scenes of our state's history, pioneer boats on Puget Sound, Mount Rainier, rising behind cedar forests. Flags stood at attention around the bench. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and hurried footsteps. Zoe sat a few rows ahead, flanked by her defense attorney, Mark Alvarez, an earnest man in a navy suit whose tie never quite stayed centered, and a court-appointed social worker clutching her file. She met my eyes for a moment, just enough to remind me why I was here. Judge Lynn Swanson entered robes, whispering against the floor, and called the court to order. Prosecutor Angela Reed Sharp composed her badge pinned over a charcoal blazer, stood and laid out the charge: theft of property exceeding $750 felony, second degree. She motioned to a screen showing the nest footage, Zoe's reflection stepping into the frame, tapping the abstract painting thumb sliding across the biometric scanner. I watched her younger face on video, expression unreadable. Reed narrated in measured tones the defendant accessed a secured safe containing a custom Mac Pro setup valued at approximately $18,000, then concealed and removed the equipment. The courtroom lights dimmed as the footage played rain streaking the video like tears, and Zoe winced. When Reed finished, Alvarez rose to cross-examine me. He questioned my harsh response to a sister in need, suggesting I'd given her no chance to repay me before calling the police. His words stung like frostbite, implying my success made me heartless. I swallowed and described the months of borrowing headphones, textbooks, tuition, each promise broken until I installed the hidden safe. He pressed, "Isn't it true, Mr. Thompson, that sibling rivalry is common and many families resolve these matters privately?" I clenched my jaw. "This wasn't a misunderstanding," I said softly. "It was theft." My voice echoed off the walls. Alvarez nodded and turned to Zoe, asking if she'd sold the Mac Pro and display for $12,000. Zoe's tear-filled eyes met mine as she whispered, "To pay down my credit card debt and help Mom and Dad." A hush fell. The twist tore at me. She hadn't planned to keep the full value, only enough to stay afloat. But she'd still stolen from me. Reed returned to the podium, outlining Zoe's premeditation she'd studied. My schedule waited until I was away at the Spheres and used my thumbprint to override security. She emphasized that intention, not regret, defined felony. Then, to support Zoe's remorse, Alvarez presented a letter from her counselor describing her genuine contrition and her willingness to make full restitution. He asked the judge for leniency, a suspended sentence, community service, and mandatory family counseling instead of incarceration. Judge Swanson listened, fingers steepled, gaze drifting from us to a bronze scale of justice mounted behind her bench, one pan empty, one weighted with a small brass Mac Pro token, a clerk held for effect. After hours of legal tug-of-war, Judge Swanson stood. The room fell silent, every breath felt audible. "I have considered the evidence, the arguments, and the impact on both victim and defendant. While Ms. Thompson's remorse is noted, the premeditated nature and significant financial harm cannot be ignored." My throat tightened as she paused. "It is my duty to uphold the law." My hand found the Zippo lighter in my pocket. Grandpa's gift, a symbol of unwavering principle, and I clenched it brass warm against my palm. Zoe sat rigid, chin trembling, eyes fixed on the bench. Therefore, the judge continued, "I find the defendant guilty of second-degree theft." Her gavel hovered above the block. Every heartbeat felt magnified. Then she rapped it down. "Guilty." The sound struck like thunder. Zoe gasped and covered her mouth. I exhaled a mixture of relief and sorrow. The judge consulted her notes. "Sentencing will take place in 2 weeks. Until then, Ms. Thompson will remain on bail under existing conditions." The clerk began to call out instructions for probation hearings and restitution filings. As the bailiff led Zoe away, Alvarez shot me a look that flickered between apology and exhaustion. Reed lowered her papers, expression neutral but satisfied. I stepped outside into the drizzle, cold droplets baptizing me in the aftermath of justice served. Grandpa waited by the courthouse steps, Zippo clipped to his coat. He offered no words, just a nod. I met his gaze, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a fragile truce between us and the broken pieces of our family. But as we walked to the car, I realized the hardest part lay ahead. Would restitution and rehabilitation heal these wounds? Or would the scars run too deep? The courthouse bell tolled, a solemn reminder that time moves forward whether we're ready or not. 2 weeks until sentencing. 2 weeks until the final reckoning. And every second stretched taut with the question, can true love survive justice? The courtroom was hushed as Judge Swanson tapped her gavel. Rain pelted the stained glass windows high above the droplets, tracing muted paths like silent witnesses to our family's unraveling. Zoe sat with her shoulders squared, but her eyes glassy, the GPS monitor at her ankle a cold reminder of barbed wire consequences. I gripped the arms of my folding chair, knuckles white against the vinyl Grandpa's Zippo lighter, heavy in my pocket, its brass surface a battered emblem of unwavering principle. The judge cleared her throat and read the sentence: 15 months in the King County Jail, restitution of $18,000 plus $1,200 in court fees and mandatory family counseling upon release. Every syllable struck like a hammer, sealing Zoe's fate and rattling the fragile bones of our home. As the gavel fell, Zoe's chin trembled. She bowed her head, tears slipping onto her jacket collar. I felt my chest tighten. Some fierce part of me wanted to rush forward, cradle her, like I did when she scraped her knee as a child. Another part recoiled, furious at the betrayal that brought us here. Alvarez rose, steadying her, as an officer moved to handcuff her again. "Stay strong," he whispered. Prosecutor Reed offered no gloat, just a brief nod that said, "Justice served without malice." I watched as Zoe was led away, her tear-stained face illuminated by the courtroom's amber glow, and wondered if this was mercy or a deeper kind of cruelty disguised as consequence. Outside, the rain had softened to a mist. Grandpa Henry stood on the courthouse steps, cap pulled low, shoulders rigid as a cedar trunk. I approached, boots squelching on wet pavement. He didn't speak, just held out the Zippo, clicking it open and closed once. That single click echoed louder than any verdict. I pocketed it and nodded. Wordless approval passed between us. Justice was meted, lines drawn, and though the cost was high, no one could claim I let wrong walk away unpunished. 2 months later, the house felt both emptier and sharper, like a blade honed to its final edge. The eviction of Mom and Dad had left silent rooms and dust motes swirling in the afternoon light. I spent long hours at my desk preparing for a promotion review at Amazon, my fingers dancing across keyboards as deadlines loomed. Then came the email: "Congratulations. Lucas promoted to Director of Product Management." A rush of pride warmed my chest, but it mixed uneasily with the lingering silence of the halls. I closed my laptop and walked to the front window, watching cedar branches tremble in a light breeze. Success felt hollow when victory meant fracturing the only family I had left. That evening, Grandpa joined me on the front porch as the sun dipped behind the Olympic mountains, painting the sky in bruised purples and gold. He passed me 2 steaming mugs of green tea, one for each of us. We sat in silence, sipping, watching neighborhood lights flicker on like distant stars. Finally, he settled back in his rocking chair and said, "You did what you believed was right." His voice was soft but carried a lifetime of conviction. I nodded, tracing the Zippo in my pocket, a symbol of the night everything changed. "I know," I replied, "but right can still hurt." He exhaled, gaze fixed on the horizon. "Sometimes scars remind us to tread carefully," he murmured, rocking gently. Later that night, I heard the soft rumble of a FedEx truck pulling up the driveway. I opened the door to find a thick manila envelope stamped with Zoe's handwriting. No return address, just her looping script, Lucas Thompson. A single tear slid down my cheek as I brought it inside. The house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant drip from a leaky gutter. I placed the envelope on the kitchen table, the yellow light casting its shadow long and distorted. My hand hovered over it, heart pounding like a door hammering in a storm. I turned away to refill my tea mug, but the envelope's pull was magnetic. I returned, easing my thumb under the flap. Inside lay a letter lined with nervous, cramped writing. Zoe spoke of nights spent haunted by my empty stare, of tears shed in the garage apartment when she saw her reflection in that dusty laptop screen, and of the long hours she worked to repay every dollar. She wrote about the fear of jail, the loneliness of confinement, and the longing for the family she'd known before ambition and envy tore us apart. At the bottom, she scrawled a final line: "I'm ready to make amends, but I don't know how to ask for your forgiveness. Will you help me find the way?" My hands shook as I refolded the letter. The kitchen light flickered and shadows danced on the walls like silent observers. The tea sat cooling in its mug long forgotten. I stared at the Zippo on the table, its brass dulled by time and conflict. Forgiveness felt like crossing a bridge that might not hold both terrifying and necessary. Outside, the night air whispered through the screen door, carrying the scent of cedar and rain. I realized that after all our trials and the judge's verdict, the real trial was just beginning. I picked up the envelope again, fingertips brushing Zoe's name. The letter's words echoed in my mind. "Will you help me find the way?" My reflection shimmered in the window glass framed by the porch light, a man caught between justice and mercy, pride and love. I pressed my palm against the cold window, feeling the pulse of the night. And then, with a gulp that tasted like both fear and hope, I opened the flap once more, ready, or so I told myself, to begin the hardest chapter yet. A final deliberate knock came at the back door. My heart leaped. I set the envelope aside, pouring my last sip of green tea into the sink. The Zippo's brass gleamed in the dim light, a beacon of resolve. I moved toward the door, every step heavy with possibility and dread. As I reached for the handle, my phone buzzed on the counter, a notification flashing new message from Zoe. "I'm outside. Please let me in." My hand froze mid-turn. Rain pattered on the roof. The line between right and wrong blurred again. Story 2. I'm Iris Valdez, 33, and I thought leaving my hometown had ended the worst chapter of my life. 10 years in another state, 2 new jobs, and 1 bright-eyed son later, I was sure the ghosts had lost my scent. Then rent doubled my savings, tanked, and a sugary phone call from my older sister Simone slid in like a blade in velvet. "Come stay at the house for a bit," she purred. Dad fixed up the guest wing. "You and little Ari can breathe." Breathe. That word should have tasted like safety. Instead, it fizzed with old dread. But 8-year-old Ari needed a roof, and I needed time to rebuild. So I packed our 2 suitcases, promised him an adventure, and flew back to Harbor Ridge, the coastal town where my voice once learned to hide. The Valdez estate sat on a cliff above the gray Atlantic, tall windows reflecting a sky that never quite brightened. Dad Mitchell Valdez, 65 retired naval officer, greeted us at the iron gate in a blazer with brass buttons, the family crest gleaming on his lapel. He hugged Simone first, clapped Ari's shoulder next, and nodded at me last like I was a guest speaker at a club he tolerated. Inside, the renovations turned out to be a storage room painted beige. 1 child-sized bed, 1 shaky dresser, 1 window the size of a postcard. "Breathe," I told myself. "Just a few months, stack cash, move on." First evenings were a replay of my teens. Dad's voice filled every hall. Mom Carmen, still delicate and distant, floated after him, polishing surfaces that already shone. Simone, 2 years older and forever flawless, set the dinner topics, her boutique's profits, her curated diet, her charity brunches. Ari and I listened, forks quiet. Yet Ari's heart refused shrinking. He loved books more than dessert. He asked Grandpa thoughtful questions about ships, which earned tight smiles. He asked Simone if he could borrow a high shelf for his paperback stack. She smirked. "Shelves are for display pieces, honey, not dog-eared paper." That night he whispered, "Mom, do we still get to read before bed?" "We do," I said. "Anywhere, even in storage rooms." A week later, the first crack widened. Ari spotted a leather-bound atlas on the library's top shelf and climbed an oak ladder to see Asia's mountains closer. The ladder slipped. A marble horse statue shattered below. The house silence broke like glass. Simone stormed in silk heels, clicking war drums, seized the atlas from Ari's hands and hissed, "Do you know how much that piece cost?" Ari stumbled an apology, cheeks flaming. Dad arrived next, eyes cold. "Boy discipline means respect." He turned to me. "You never taught it, Iris." "I'll pay for the statue," I said, voice steady but shaking inside. "That won't replace heritage," Simone snapped. She pushed Ari's shoulder, not hard enough to knock him over, just enough to brand him. Something inside me flashed hot. I stepped between them, pulled my son close, and met her eyes. Touch him again, and heritage will be the least of your worries. Dad laughed, a low, rusted sound. Empty threats from the family dropout. Mom stood in the doorway, wiping invisible dust from her apron, gaze fixed on the floorboards. That night, I found Ari in our narrow bed, knees hugged to his chest, silent tears glistening. He whispered, "Am I a problem, Mom?" I swallowed the splinter in my throat. "You are my reason, not a problem." But words couldn't erase the bruise of humiliation. He slept fitfully. I didn't sleep at all. By dawn, I had weighed jobs, shelters, even campgrounds. Each option ended in the same thought. Running keeps them powerful. I brewed bitter coffee in the silent kitchen and watched gray waves hammer the cliff. Dad's favorite framed quote hung above the stove. "Strength is earned through obedience." The letters blurred. A new resolve settled like iron in my bones. If Simone wanted an audience, she'd soon have it. If Dad worshipped appearances, I'd peel them back. I would not run this time. I would rewrite every rule they wrote in fear. When Ari patted in for breakfast, I knelt to his level. "We're drawing up battle plans, Captain," I whispered with a smile he hadn't seen since we arrived. His eyes lit a tiny ember, reigniting. "Does that mean we leave?" "It means," I said, handing him a spoon, "we decide how the story ends." Outside, gulls screamed over the surf. Inside, Simone rehearsed for her charity gala. Dad polished medals no one asked to see. Mom set 4 places at an immaculate table, pretending the 5th never existed. None of them sensed the tide turning under their feet. I had come home to survive. I was about to learn how to win. I woke before the gulls and before Dad's antique brass bell could rattle. The halls rolled out of the child-sized bed without waking Ari and slipped into the corridor. Map in hand, I paced the house like a cartographer plotting a siege, doors, cameras, creaky steps. The place whispered its secrets when no one listened. In the kitchen, Clara Diaz, the only staff member who had survived every renovation, poured coffee for 2. She raised an eyebrow. "You still take it black with sugar, Nina?" Her quiet loyalty had been my shield in high school, and when she pressed the warm mug into my palms, I felt the old alliance spark. I told her in low Spanish that Simone had crossed a line. Clara's eyes gleamed. "Lines are stitched to be unstitched, Hija. Find the loose thread." Advice. Tucked away, I drove Ari to school in Mom's unused sedan past clapboard houses and sea fog, pretending the morning was ordinary. On the return, I stopped at Luna Bean Cafe, the town's gossip exchange. And there, fate handed me my first thread, Miguel Reyes, once the lanky kid who shared my mixtapes, now a journalist with ink-stained fingers and a gaze that missed nothing. He slid into the booth opposite me, smirked at my wary look, and whispered, "When the prodigal Valdez comes back, paper sales spike. Coffee on me if you tell me why you really returned." I laughed it off, but the friend I remembered watched my shoulders sag and traded banter for concern. I hinted at wanting a fresh start, hoping he could sniff around Simone's boutique finances. He agreed, but only if I promised the exclusive once the storm broke. Deal. Back at the estate, the marble foyer buzzed with florists and caterers. Simone, in a crimson blazer, directed them like a film director high on applause. Her fiancé, Elliot Crane, 38, Gordon Gecko Slick, studied balance sheets on a tablet. He caught me eyeing him, smiled with predator polish, and said he admired people who traveled light, gesturing at my scuffed sneakers. Simone tightened beside him, signal received. She introduced him anyway, voice honeyed, but eyes knives, then tasked me with folding 300 name cards for the gala because even you can't ruin cardboard. I accepted with a smile that did not reach my eyes. While I arranged place cards in the library, Ari burst in breathless, waving a flyer the Harbor Ridge Kids Debate Tournament needed participants. He wanted to try, but feared stuttering. I knelt, told him courage wasn't about loudness. It was about truth delivered, even if your voice trembled. We practiced opening lines between monarch-embossed rugs until his confidence rose like sun through fog. The moment he left, I examined Simone's dusty safe tucked behind naval paintings. The combination pad bore fresh fingerprints. Remembering Dad's obsession with battle dates, I tried the year he'd earned his highest commendation. The lock clicked. Inside lay 2 items, a burgundy ledger, stamped Oaken Holdings, and a flash drive. I snapped photos of the ledger pages, payments to offshore accounts, boutique invoices 10 times normal cost, Elliot's signature gliding across every line. Suddenly, the parlor door opened. Mom stepped in with a vase. Seeing my guilty stance, she froze, then shut the door and whispered, "I've learned to ignore things, Iris. Don't make me choose." Her plea sliced deeper than Simone's insults. I slipped the ledger back, closed the safe, hugged her brittle frame, and promised I would protect her one way or another. As dusk colored the waves, Dad summoned the family for dinner with his naval whistle. The dining room glittered crystal silver and tension. He announced a surprise his lawyer would visit after the gala to discuss estate succession. Simone's smile blazed like victory fireworks. She glanced at me the way cats watch caged birds. Elliot toasted to dynasty. I raised my glass of water and toasted to accountability, watching his grin flicker. After dessert, he cornered me on the veranda, salt wind whipping his perfect hair. He proposed half jest, half dare that I should join his consulting firm in New York, where my tenacity could earn more than folding cards. I countered that laundering money tends to tarnish resumes. His pupils shrank. His fist around the railing whitened. He warned that people who dig into other people's spreadsheets sometimes fall off cliffs. I walked away, pulse hammering, resolved not to meet him alone again. Later that night, I found Clara airing linens in the attic. She handed me a weathered journal belonging to my late Uncle Raphael, Dad's younger brother, who had vanished in a sailing accident years before I was born. In neat handwriting, Raphael described how Mitchell censured him for exposing fraudulent contracts within the naval supply chain. The last entry ended mid-sentence. My father had silenced blood before. The pattern chilled me. I photographed every page, thanked Clara, and locked the journal in Ari's suitcase under dinosaur pajamas. Midnight. I logged into an old laptop, emailed Miguel the photos, and asked him to trace Oaken Holdings and any connection to Valdez Investments. He replied within minutes, shell corporations flagged in 2 federal probes, 1 sealed. Evidence could bury careers. He urged caution. People tied to that name had a habit of disappearing. My reply: so do cornered daughters. I hit send and closed the lid as wind battered the windows like fists. Sleep came in shards. At dawn, I woke to Ari cheering. His debate acceptance email had arrived. Simone pretended enthusiasm but scheduled gala rehearsals exactly during his practice sessions. I shifted placards to midnight hours, coached Ari at sunrise, and earned dark circles Simone called appropriate. On the eve of the gala, I watched trucks unload champagne stamped with foreign customs stickers. Elliot argued with a driver about missing crates. I noted the manifest numbers. When he stalked off, I snapped photos of the box's Oaken logos beneath gold foil. Beneath the estate's polished veneer, contraband pulsed like rot. I wasn't just fighting for respect anymore. I was hunting the truth that could free Ari and Mom, and maybe even the frightened part of myself that once ran. The tide was rising fast. All I needed was the right moment to let it crash, and the gala, glittering and televised, would give me a stage no threat could silence. The morning of the gala arrived cloaked in silver fog that rolled off the Atlantic and pressed against the estate's glass like curious hands. Yet inside the mansion, every surface glittered under chandeliers camouflaging the rot I had tasted for days. Caterers scurried in pressed uniforms, florists layered orchids over orchids until the air itself smelled expensive, and Simone strutted between them, directing a symphony of perfection while I, invisible in plain sight, stitched the last loops of my plan. Ari ate toast beside me at the kitchen island legs, swinging cheeks smudged with jam, reciting debate openings between bites. His voice quivered on the word integrity, and each tremor reminded me why I would not blink tonight. After school drop-off, I met Miguel behind the Luna Bean, where roasting beans hissed like steam engines. He handed me a thin folder stamped with a judge's seal evidence that Oaken Holdings funneled cash through the boutique to purchase embargoed tech documents someone had tried to bury. He also slid across a printed email chain showing Elliot begging Simone to move shipment schedules so regulators would stay blind. My pulse drummed. Miguel warned the report wouldn't survive chain of custody scrutiny unless a public official acknowledged it first. I said the gala would host Congresswoman Harper, the Coastal District's anti-corruption firebrand. He grinned, told me to aim the spotlight properly, and vanished into the fog. Back home, Clara slipped me a small key labeled Wine Cellar B. She whispered that Elliot had banned staff entry there and that cameras pointed away conveniently. After dusk, I crept below marble stairs into the cool cellar maze. Vault B hid 10 unregistered crates identical to the ones in yesterday's truck lids, half pried, revealing phones with military-grade encryption stickers, each taped with custom slips stamped diversion authorized. I filmed every angle, then locked the door and pocketed a bottle of Dad's prized 40-year scotch. I would need leverage and perhaps celebration. Upstairs, stylists wove my hair into loose waves and zipped me into an emerald gown Simone had rejected for herself. In the mirror, I looked composed, but the woman staring back held a storm behind her eyes. Guests flooded in at 7 gowns gleaming like spilled jewels, the quartet bowing through Vivaldi. Dad greeted donors with Naval Academy firmness. Simone accepted compliments like oxygen. Elliot flashed grin, dagger grin. Congresswoman Harper arrived in a charcoal cape journalists orbiting. I intercepted her with polite fanfare, guided her to the East Gallery, supposedly to view naval artifacts, but actually to hand her Miguel's folder. I summarized discreetly: shell companies, embargo violations, a ledger signed by Elliot, and shipments on Valdez property right now. Her eyebrows arched. She asked if physical proof existed. I handed her the cellar key, told her to walk there after dessert, camera crew optional. She tucked the key into her glove and said, "If this checks out, expect noise." At dinner, Simone announced a live charity auction of exclusive tech luxury gift sets, vetted personally by my fiancé, and waiters rolled in silk-lined cases filled with the very phones I'd filmed. Elliot began praising cutting-edge encryption for private lives. His PR flourish reeked of irony. I excused myself, hurried to the back corridor, and texted Miguel live stream room 4. He responded with a thumbs-up emoji already tuned to the gala's video feed. When I returned, Ari and Mom had been ushered to the family table near the stage. Mom looked anxious. Ari clutched debate note cards because Simone insisted he give a cute kid speech before the fundraiser tally. I squeezed his shoulder, whispered, "Speak truth. I'll handle the rest." He nodded, tiny general, ready for battle. Stage lights bloomed. Ari walked up in his little suit, microphone trembling, and began, "Integrity means doing right when nobody applauds." He spoke slowly, each word clearer than the last. Recalling the story of a sailor who lied about cargo to protect wealth but sank a fleet in the storm, an allegory we had rehearsed, but his improvised ending stunned me. My mom says storms reveal what shiny decks hide. The room hushed. Simone's smile cracked. Applause erupted earnest and wide before he even thanked them. As he stepped down, Congresswoman Harper slipped out a side door with 2 staffers heading cellarward. Now the fuse was lit. Simone kicked off the auction. Bids soared. At $150,000, Dad banged his gavel to close a lot when a security guard hustled up, whispering frantic. Dad's face drained. He glanced at me as though seeing a ghost steering his ship toward reefs. Harper returned, flanked by uniformed customs agents. She commandeered the microphone, voice ringing, "These devices violate federal trade embargoes. This property is now an active investigation site." Gasps ricocheted. Elliot bolted toward the foyer, but 2 agents blocked him. Flashbulbs exploded. Simone screeched about sabotage, pointing at me. Dad barked for order, but cameras loved chaos. I stepped onto the stage because silence would read as guilt. I addressed the crowd in steady cadence when families wrap secrets in luxury communities pay the price. Tonight's revelations demand accountability, not applause. My words streamed live. Miguel confirmed later our feed hit 50,000 viewers within minutes. Elliot was cuffed for questioning. Simone clung to Dad, mascara streaking. Agents escorted them aside. Mom sat motionless, a tear tracing paths over years of silence. Ari squeezed her hand. The gala dissolved into sirens and whispers. Outside fog swallowed blue lights, and the estate felt less like a fortress than an empty set after the cameras cut. Hours later, Harper assured me the evidence would trigger hearings. She thanked me for courage, adding that whistleblowers rarely stand alone. I replied, "Sometimes they grow roots in the storm." She smiled, waved goodnight. Clara brewed chamomile and toasted our quiet victory with the scotch I'd stolen. She called it poetic justice. Yet exhaustion couldn't mute the new dread Dad wasn't in cuffs, and men like him regroup. In the hallway, I overheard his gravel voice on the phone talking damage control and loyal prosecutors. Dawn approached when I finally lay beside Ari, heartbeat syncing with his slow breaths. We had cracked marble tonight, but beneath lay deeper stone. As sleep crept in, I promised myself the next strike would shatter the foundation or bury me trying. The day after the gala dawn leaked gray across Harbor Ridge, but inside the Valdez estate, sunlight felt illegal. Police tape crossed the foyer, orchids lay toppled like wounded swans, and silence throbbed louder than last night's sirens. I brewed coffee, while Ari sketched debate arguments at the table. He asked whether winning always looked this messy. I told him truth was a tide, it cleans the shore but drags wreckage with it. Miguel called as I rinsed cups. Elliot had posted bail at 4 a.m., lawyered up with a firm known for erasing footprints. Simone vanished from social media, her boutique closed for inventory. Dad, however, was not retreating. I found him in the study polishing metals, the same ritual he used to mask fury. He announced a family meeting at noon, non-negotiable. Noon arrived with storm pressure. Mom sat perched, skin translucent after a sleepless night. Simone dialed in by video, face blotched but defiant. Dad opened by blaming external agitators, meaning me, for overblown accusations. He said regulators would be appeased, fines paid, and family legacy preserved. I countered that Harper's task force wasn't backing down. Congressional subpoenas were signed. Dad's stare hardened like turned steel. He declared that my presence endangered Ari's welfare. He planned to petition for temporary guardianship until media hysteria subsides. My lungs froze. Simone's digital smirk flickered. She offered Ari enrollment at a Swiss boarding school where tabloids couldn't reach. Mom whispered, "Enough," but Dad continued, "Children need stability, not crusades." I kept my voice level. Removing Ari would amplify scrutiny, and any judge would ask why a decorated officer harbored embargo contraband. Dad smiled thinly. He had friends on benches. The meeting adjourned with no resolution, just lines dug deeper. I rushed to Clara. She handed me a manila envelope slid under the kitchen door an hour earlier. Inside lay copies of shipping logs from 3 years back, Rafael Valdez's name inked in margins, flagging cargo discrepancies identical to Okayan's. A post-it read, "He died because he questioned the tide. Don't let history loop." No signature. My breath caught. The warning felt like a lifeline and a threat. I drove straight to Miguel's office above the old cinema. He cross-referenced the logs with Naval Archives. Rafael had filed an ethics complaint weeks before his accident, but the file was sealed by Admiral Mitchell Valdez, my father. Pattern confirmed. We needed one more nail-proof. Dad still directed the scheme after Elliot's arrest. Clara texted that Dad would meet a man named Brenner. At the Cliff Boathouse tonight, Brenner handled client retrieval. Likely code for smuggling evidence offshore. We planned a stakeout. At dusk, fog rolled in thick as spilled milk. Miguel parked his rusted sedan down the coastal track. I slipped out with his spare DSLR, heart jackhammering. The boathouse lantern glowed faint through mist. Inside, Dad spoke in clipped phrases about moving crates before auditors arrive and a fallback stash in the Gulf. Brenner asked payment up front. Dad handed him a leather pouch heavy with coin clink. Camera shutter muted by fabric, I captured everything. Faces, ledgers on the table. GPS coordinates sketched on a chart. Then floorboards groaned under my boot. Brenner spun, torchlight speared fog. I bolted camera pressed to chest. Footsteps pounded behind. Miguel revved the engine headlights off to avoid glare. I dove into the passenger seat as a shot cracked, punching a chunk from the sedan's rear glass. Miguel hit the gas, gravel sprayed. Brenner's silhouette shrank pistol raised but swallowed by fog. Safe 2 blocks away, adrenaline ebbed into shakes. Miguel's knuckles were white. He muttered that journalism never paid hazard pay. I thanked him anyway. We backed up photos twice and emailed copies to Harper's secure server. She answered within minutes, enough to open a federal investigation into Mitchell himself. She advised finding safe lodging until warrant served. I couldn't abandon Mom or Ari, not yet. Back at the estate, Clara met me at the servants' entrance with a duffel. Important documents she'd saved over the years, Raphael's original complaint maintenance logs showing which crew replaced his lifeboat hatch the day he vanished, and letters from Carmen to an attorney she never mailed. Clara had kept them for the day someone listened. Tears blurred my vision. I hugged her hard. Upstairs, Mom sat on Ari's bed reading him Treasure Island, voice trembling. Ari slept unaware of monsters regrouping. I told Mom we had proof Dad sank Raphael's career and probably his life. She closed the book, eyes glassy, and confessed she'd suspected but convinced herself loyalty was virtue. She agreed to leave at dawn before Dad returned from the boathouse. We packed passports, Ari's drawings, and Clara's cash. Near 3 a.m., a car crunched the drive Dad earlier than expected. We killed lights, slipped down the servants' staircase. Clara coached us through laundry tunnels leading to the cliff stables unused since tourism cut horse tours. Miguel waited with the sedan patched by tape. As we crawled inside, stables' floodlights blazed. Dad's voice thundered my name. He strode toward us, hand inside coat. I stepped out, blocking his path. He ordered me back to house talks. I replied that the house now belonged to federal marshals. He declared me ungrateful, spreading arms wide like a preacher. Everything he did protected the family. I said, protection, built on crime poisons, what it saves. Sirens wailed distantly. Harper's warrant team right on schedule. Dad glanced over his shoulder, eyes calculating escape. I revealed I'd sent Brenner recordings too. If I disappeared, videos auto-published. Dad's shoulders sagged, metals dull under stable lights. He whispered, "You're still that frightened girl." I answered, "Yes," and she finally learned to roar. Agents' SUVs crested the hill. Dad raised his hands. Miguel gunned the engine, ferrying Mom and Ari toward a safe motel. I stayed to watch Dad cuffed the clang, echoing like church bells on a stormless morning. In that moment, I understood Tide's unstoppable yet patient, forever reshaping stone. Tomorrow we'd face courts, headlines healing, but tonight the undertow released us. The morning after Dad's arrest dawned strangely bright, as if the sun wanted to prove clouds were a choice. Yet every beam felt fragile, sliding across motel curtains where Mom, Ari, and I had slept in one tangled heap. Miguel's sedan sat outside, wobbling on its taped window, a reminder that victory never rides a limousine. Over vending machine coffee, we planned our day. Congresswoman Harper had secured temporary protective status for us, while federal marshals cataloged the estate. Simone, still hiding behind publicists, released a statement blaming rogue employees, a phrase so hollow even tabloids laughed. Elliot flipped first. Faced with decades in prison, he traded spreadsheets for leniency, naming Dad as Architect Simone as accessory. News crawls looped his deposition while stock tickers of Valdez shipping bled red. I tried not to gloat justice tastes better without spite, but Ari fist-pumped when the anchor said federal indictment. The real test, however, waited in family court. Dad's emergency petition for Ari's guardianship had been filed hours before his arrest and still required a hearing. Judges love process more than headlines. Miguel drove us downtown. Reporters swarmed like gulls on dropped fries, shouting questions about coastal treason, but Harper's aides flanked us through metal detectors and into a pale courtroom that smelled of copier toner. Across the aisle sat Dad in a gray suit, minus medals wrists free because white-collar defendants get privileges. Simone, eyes hidden by sunglasses indoors, clutched a designer scarf as though strangled by silk. Their lawyer argued that my lifestyle, unstable income, public danger, rendered me unfit while the Valdez estate offered security. My counsel countered with evidence of smuggling, offshore laundering, and an ongoing investigation. Then Dad stood, voice steady, claiming he loved his grandson and simply feared my reckless crusade. I realized he actually believed that. The judge listened stone-faced, then asked Ari if he wished to speak. My heart stuttered, but Ari rose tiny tie, crooked. He said, "I want to stay with my mom because she tells the truth even when it's scary, and scary truth is safer than fancy lies." Silence wrapped the room. The judge cleared her throat, denied Dad's petition, and ordered supervised visitation pending criminal outcomes. Gavel down, battle won. Outside cameras flashed. Ari squinted like a celebrity caught before hair and makeup. Miguel guided us to the car. He told me leaked documents now tied Dad's naval contracts to 3 other defense scandals. Senate hearings were inevitable. I exhaled, but relief carried weight. Exposure meant more enemies. That night, we checked into a secure apartment provided by a whistleblower fund. Walls were bare, furniture basic, yet laughter echoed when Mom cooked arroz con pollo from memory. She apologized for years of hush. I forgave her because silence can be armor when screams go unheard. Over dinner, we mapped the future, testify, relocate, rebuild. Ari suggested writing a book called Storm Truths. Mom promised illustrations of gulls beating storms. I tucked him in and lingered, watching his lashes twitch. Children heal faster than adults if adults do the heavy lifting. Days blurred into depositions. Federal agents combed every corner of Valdez operations. Simone tried leveraging charity clout, but donors fled. She eventually requested a private meeting. Against advice, I agreed, choosing a glass-walled cafe downtown for safety. She arrived, mascara-tempered voice, softer than I remembered. She offered a truce if I publicly stated Dad acted alone. She would drop all civil actions and let bygones dissolve. I saw fear behind her proposal. Auditors had frozen her accounts. I declined, reminding her Raphael's ghost deserved more than family silence. She called me sanctimonious and left heels clicking like countdowns. Harper's office soon relayed that Simone Cornered filed intent to cooperate. Dominoes fall fastest when one tips herself. Meanwhile, community reaction shifted. Harbor Ridge residents, once starstruck by the estate, now felt betrayed by years of hidden crime. A local paper asked me to write an op-ed about moral duty. I drafted at the kitchen table past midnight, weaving Ari's metaphor of tides revealing buried glass. Miguel edited for Punch, and the piece ran Sunday under the headline, "When Glitter Hides Guilt." Comments poured in, some grateful, others accusing me of tarnishing hometown pride. I answered only one, a high school teacher who thanked me for proving courage could outgrow shame. Courtroom aftershocks reached personal spaces too. Letters from naval officers who served under Dad arrived, some condemning, some confessing suspicion, but fear of reprisal. I saved each proof that complicity thrives in polite silence. Therapy sessions started for Ari and me, offered by the fund. The counselor used analogy games. Ari drew cliffs collapsing into sea, but also bridges made of driftwood, fragile yet spanning the chasm. I drew a compass, missing the north arrow. We talked about forging new bearings. One evening, Mom emerged from the bedroom with a sealed envelope addressed to Raphael's widow in Mexico. She had written countless letters, but never mailed them. Tonight, we stamped and posted the final draft closure, traveling by airmail. Weeks later, pre-trial motions filled federal dockets. Dad's legal team pursued delay tactics, citing health issues. Prosecutors countered with recent footage of him jogging the prison yard. The judge set a firm trial date. Harper invited me to testify before a Senate subcommittee on defense contract corruption. I feared public speaking, yet Ari reminded me of his debate mantra, tremble but talk. On the flight to D.C., clouds below looked like endless surf. I gripped armrests until turbulence settled into calm, what pilots call smooth air above the storm. At the Capitol, marble pillars felt familiar, another grand facade masking fragile systems. Under bright lights, I told the panel about a father who equated obedience with strength, about an uncle erased for dissent, about crates hidden under cathedrals of wealth. Senators asked if loyalty and patriotism could coexist with whistleblowing. I answered that true loyalty defends the innocent, not the powerful. Applause erupted rare in hearings. The moment shimmered like salt in sun. Returning to Harbor Ridge, we passed the estate one last time. Yellow tape gone windows, boarded auction notices stapled to gates. Seagrass had crept across pathways, claiming cracks left by investigators. The house looked smaller, almost ordinary. Ari asked if ghosts move when houses empty. I said ghosts stay only where secrets live. We had taken the secrets away. That night, we signed lease papers for a modest seaside cottage, 2 bedrooms, a tiny porch, enough space for hope. I accepted a part-time role teaching creative writing at Ari's school. Miguel pitched a book deal for both of us, each chapter pairing investigative narrative with Ari's illustrations. Mom enrolled in community college art classes, finally free to mix color without wiping it away. Fears still whispered, anonymous emails, engines idling late at night, but each dawn arrived unafraid. I kept Clara updated. She now managed a local bakery, kneading dough instead of cleaning silver. She wrote that customers loved her rebellion rolls, sweet bread dusted with sea salt sugar. We laughed over the phone, 2 conspirators turned survivors. 1 month before trial, prosecutors offered Dad a plea, admit guilt, accept 15 years surrender pensions. He requested to speak with me. Against caution, I visited the detention center. Plexiglass separated us. His hands, once steady, trembled. He said he never wanted me harmed, only protected from consequences. Adults understand. I replied that consequences define adults. He asked if Ari thought of him. I said Ari remembers the sailor stories but rewrote the endings. Dad's eyes closed. He took the deal next morning. Headlines read, Valdez pleads, dynasty ends. I felt neither triumph nor sorrow, only release, like unclasping a necklace that always choked. In the new cottage, we toasted with Clara's bread and grocery store soda. Ari pinned his latest drawing on the fridge, a lighthouse whose beams split waves, revealing a small boat sailing forward. Beneath, he wrote truth guides. I stood there, sun through window stripes, realizing storms are weather, not destiny. We had charted new maps, not free from squalls, but steering by integrity. And for the first time since I boarded a plane home, I could breathe without tasting dread. 6 months passed, like pages caught in a steady breeze, each turning with less crackle of tension than the one before, and Harbor Ridge slowly forgot how loudly the Valdez name once echoed. The estate remained boarded vines knitting across stone, while our cottage thrummed with small, ordinary miracles. Mom laughter painting seashells, Ari racing gulls along the surf, me typing lesson plans beneath a salt-sprayed window. The Senate committee released its final report in early spring, a 400-page reckoning that cited our evidence no fewer than 31 times. Recommendations for procurement reform splashed across national front pages for a day, then ceded headlines to newer storms. Yet I printed 2 copies anyway, one for Ari's future civics class, another sealed for Raphael's widow, who responded with a handwritten note, "Justice delayed is still justice if it arrives on honest wings." Miguel's book proposal sold advance modest, but enough to repair his sedan and upgrade our porch into a reading nook. We co-wrote on weekends, his reporter Precision balancing my teacher Cadence, Ari contributing ink-washed illustrations of lighthouses, tidal maps, and a small figure steering through chop. Clara's bakery, Pan de Rebellion, expanded to a second storefront. Every loaf bore a stamped gull in flight, her secret nod to the night we breached marble facades with crumbs of truth. One mild Friday, Harper visited the cottage unannounced, wearing sneakers instead of congressional heels. She carried a beach blanket and a folder marked closed. On the sand, she spread both the blanket for conversation, the folder for closure. Inside lay a notarized statement from Brenner admitting Dad ordered operational containment against anyone exposing Oaken confirmation of the bullet that shattered Miguel's window and the decades-old sabotage that sank Raphael. Harper told us Brenner negotiated 5 years in exchange for testimony, and that with his plea, the case was officially concluded. Waves hissed against shoreline pebbles, their applause softer than courtroom cheers, yet deeper. I let the folder flap shut and felt a knot I hadn't noticed loosen in my ribs. The following week, Ari stood before his third-grade class to present My Family Adventure. He described cliff houses, secret cellars, and the lesson that bravery sometimes sounds like asking hard questions. His teacher emailed me later praising his poise. I read the message twice, remembering the boy who once doubted every syllable. Growth, I realized, is courage wearing comfortable shoes. Night after night, gentle rituals replaced war footing. We baked cinnamon bread, we argued about comic plots, we planted thyme in cracked mugs. Even Simone resurfaced, sending a terse postcard from a restorative retreat in the Rockies seeking higher ground. Maybe we all should. I folded it away, unsure whether to interpret as apology or altitude report, yet I felt no urge to reply. Some chapters close without dialogue. In early summer, Dad wrote from prison, first letter in my mailbox since sentencing. The handwriting looked older, slanted by regret. He spoke of therapy sessions where he confronted command and control delusions, admitted he wielded loyalty like a hammer, asked if I could visit when ready. I read the pages beneath porch light, heart tugged between scar and bloodline. I didn't decide that night. Forgiveness, I knew, wasn't a verdict, but a journey measured in footsteps, not leaps. Still, I tucked the letter beside Raphael's complaint, the beginning and near end of a long deception, reminding myself that memory can hold contradiction without collapsing. Late July brought the Harbor Ridge Summer Festival first since the scandal. Miguel suggested debuting our book manuscript at the town literary tent. I hesitated. Public arenas carried echoes of gala spotlights, but Ari insisted, claiming readers deserved the map we'd drawn. On festival morning, the sky unfurled flawless blue sentinel kites darting above stalls. Our booth, modest, bore a banner Ari painted, "Tides Tell Truths." Locals approached cautiously then, with widening smiles as they recognized Clara's bakery samples arrayed beside paperback proofs. Questions flowed about whistleblowing, about healing, about how a child's speech toppled a dynasty. I answered with steady warmth, noticing that every explanation grew shorter, simpler, as if the story itself had shed armor. At sunset, the mayor, once Dad's golfing partner, awarded Ari a Youth Civic Medal for reminding adults that integrity starts young. Applause rolled across the pier, mixing with accordion music and gull cries. I looked toward the distant cliff where our old house silhouetted against orange sky, realizing it had dwindled to scenery. That evening, we returned to the cottage. Humming festival tunes, arms laden with unsold loaves, Clara insisted we freeze for winter. Ari fell asleep on the couch, mid-sentence, book clutched to chest. I covered him with a quilt, mom-stitched from remnants of uniforms and gala tablecloths, fabric once separating roles now sewn into common warmth. Stepping onto the porch, I breathed the brine-sweet night and thought about currents, how they tug, then release, how they reshape coasts slowly yet surely, and how if you learn their rhythm, you can ride them beyond old horizons. I wasn't the frightened girl Dad mocked, nor solely the roaring woman who faced him. I was something larger, a mosaic of every tide I had survived. I pulled a pen and began drafting the epilogue of our manuscript. When storms pass, they leave tide pools. Some hold debris, some cradle new life. Our choice is what we nurture. Words flowed, unfettered sentences, short, clear shore. No marble ceiling hovered above only open sky peppered with stars. And somewhere inland, a prison yard lamp flickered, perhaps illuminating a man reading a child's metal headline, learning that strength can also mean surrender. The sea whispered approval, and I answered with quiet resolve. Tomorrow I would write Dad back, not to reopen wounds, but to chart a channel where accountability and compassion might sail the same vessel. For Ari, for Mom, for the memory of Raphael, and for every voice still muffled by ornate walls, I promised to keep the beam of truth sweeping constant as the lighthouse sketched on our fridge. Because legacies are not inheritance. They are choices rippling forward, and ours now moved with the honest pull of dawn.